Hello, everyone, and welcome to Virtual Bourbon. We have a fun event tonight. We've got a dusty tasting where we're going to be tasting some old JW Dant, and we're going to be comparing it to a modern version as well. So it should be fun, and we'll see. We'll see. Our buddy Mike Gaskamp says he feels like this is going to be an easy one. Well, we never know till we taste it. That's the fun of the blind tasting. You just don't know till you get to it. So I'll be here hosting, and then as always, joining us is Mr. Wes Hardin. Hey, Wes, how you doing, man?
Hey, Steve, how's it going?
I'm doing good, absolutely. And we always enjoy when we get a guest to come on, someone that is affiliated with the brand or the distillery or whatever it is. Or in this case, we have some family history here, so we've got Tim Dant joining us. Hey, Tim, how you doing?
Great, thank you,
Good.
Steve, for having us. Wes, thank you so much. It's in my blood, literally. So
exactly. So we'll have some fun with this. As we go through this, of course, Wes does a great job of going through history and stuff like that, but he's got to rely on the internet. You can rely on family history. So feel free to supplement anything that's being said tonight, or if there's anything that needs to be corrected, jump in. You won't embarrass us because we know that, you've got the real scoop. So that'll be a fun part of this. And then, of course, for our audience here, Tim plays along with us. He'll be at the end. He'll be trying to guess. He hasn't been told in any way what is what. Even I don't know. So I'll be playing along as well. So as always. So with that, I'll turn it over to Wes to kick off tonight's program.
All right. Welcome, everyone. So there's a ton of people on here. In fact, I think there's only a couple of people that may have not attended before. So I just want to start with everyone should have two samples. One is labeled as a JW Dant 1 and the other is labeled as a JW Dant 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple of things. One, I'm going to go through the history of the brand, but also the JW Dant family and some of the history there. Tim is obviously going to jump in at any time to either A, correct me, or B, supplement what we're talking about.
And he's got a little bit of memorabilia too to share. Wes, some cool stuff to share when it's appropriate. Nice. He's got some visual stuff he wants to show.
Absolutely. And so along the way, what we'll do is no one wants to sit here and listen to me talk for 30 minutes nonstop. So what we're going to do along the way is we're going to stop and we're going to sample 1 and sample 2. We nose it, we taste it, and we give just opinions on what we think of the whiskey at that time. What I would like to ask everyone to do is hold off until the end on telling us which one is your favorite and which one is the dusty. So we do a round table. We get through everybody at the very end. And then we see how well everyone did guessing which one's the dusty, which one's your favorite. There's no right or wrong answer. It's whatever you prefer. But what I do ask everyone is to hold their opinions on which one is which until the end. That way we don't skew everyone else's opinion and people can make their own opinion along the way. So let's jump in here. So I want to start it off with we talk about this on a lot of these events as far as people's opinion of what a Kentucky bourbon or even bourbon in general, but if it's bourbon history, it's basically Kentucky. A Kentucky bourbon Mount Rushmore as far as lineage and family and so forth. I think it would be hard to pick 4 without having the without having the Dant family on there for sure. And let's see. Yeah. So if you guys,
Tim's got looks like he's got a Mount Rushmore, a prop there. He's got a Mount Rushmore. Is that in there, Tim?
Only because Wes actually mentioned Mount Rushmore. And Wes, thank you for that great lead in. If you're familiar with the brand, over the years, it was bought and sold to companies like National Distillers, United Distillers, Arm & Hammer. And when Shinley Distillers got a hold of it in the 50s and 60s, they created a very unique marketing program called the Americana series, where they created decanters, and one of their promotions Mount Rushmore.
I've actually never seen that one. It's pretty cool.
Decanter.
Oh wow, yeah. Well, that thing.
And so they would fill this with 86 proof bourbon, as opposed to the 100 proof bottled and bond. But this was an 8-year JW Dant that went in at 86 proof, and all these decanters, I say all, there was about 10 or 12 of them that reflected American history. And of course, this one had its own packaging.
Yep.
Mount Rushmore. So no, it's a great lead in, Wes. Thank you.
Perfect. I appreciate it. I've never seen that one before. It's cool. Just when you think you've seen them all, then someone pulls out one you've never seen before. So
yep.
Yep. So to me, I think obviously for this purpose, the Dant family definitely deserves to be on the Mount Rushmore of bourbon. Obviously, the Beams are up there, and then from there you can argue who's up there next. But no matter what the argument is, I think the Dants always are in the conversation. It should be there. So to me, it's a really it's a really intriguing story. It's a long story. So let's get started. I'll go through a little bit of history, and then we'll stop and start attacking sample one here in just a second. So the Dant, I call it a legacy because that's what it is. The Dant legacy started back around 1836. So it started with Joseph W. Dant. He was born in Marion County. Most everyone knows, if you know anything about Kentucky, you know where Marion County is. In about 1820. And this is probably the cooler. We're going to talk about one of the cooler parts of the story early on, because that's just the way it worked. At the age of 16, he fashions his first still. And he fashioned it out of a log. So when I read about this years ago, and I'm like, wait a minute, you can't distill out of a log, but yeah, you actually can. And then basically what he did was, back in those days, obviously distilling was more of a byproduct of agriculture and leftover grains. And what are you going to do with them? Hey, our descendants made whiskey over in Europe, and the people that migrated from Maryland and West Virginia and into Kentucky area, they were distillers, mainly of rye back in the time. So corn grows well here. We've got a ton of corn. We've got excess. What are we going to do? Let's make whiskey, right? You need it for all kinds of purposes. And if for people that either couldn't afford or didn't want to purchase or couldn't buy a still, the Dant started distilling out of a log. So basically they took two logs, put a copper pipe in the middle, put the two ends together, and then basically they just made a makeshift still. So they fermented mash, and the steam would feed through the piping, and creating the distillation process. So they called it running it on a log. And I think later on, we get towards at the very end of this, we'll talk about how the families kind of come full circle as far as what I'm talking about now, which was the start of the Dant distilling and kind of what's been resurrected recently, and that running it on the log and the log still comes into play. And we'll kick that out to Tim later on and let him walk through that. And it's a crude method, or it would have been at the time, but in the right hands, they made acceptable whiskey out of it. They grew their own grains. Joseph grew his own grains. He built his own barrels, and that led to the creation of a cooperage that he owned. So, you talk about self-sustaining and people, now it's, farm to glass, craft distilleries and so forth. There still aren't craft distilleries today that are making their own barrels. In fact, out of all of the distilleries out there, there's not many that actually make their own barrels. I know Brown-Forman owns, they own a cooperage, but it's not the same as doing everything on site and making it themselves. And so he started making whiskey, started selling it locally like everyone did. And then he started, trading with people, mainly in New Orleans. And he built rafts and floated it down the Mississippi to New Orleans. This is one of the things I wanted to ask Tim about. I don't know if it could even be substantiated. It's one of those, like, you hear some of those crazy stories that are so crazy that it's hard to know if it's true. But one of the stories about him was that he actually took the raft down the Mississippi on 3 different occasions. Supposedly, he ended up walking the 600 miles back to Kentucky. Is that true
Really?
or not?
I would
Or do we know?
As I'm talking to you, I'm trying to hopefully that reflects the words Dant Station, Kentucky. Can you see that?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Can everyone see that?
yeah,
Yes.
yep, I see it.
It's got the actual geographic coordinate, and it says Dant Station, Kentucky. And back to Wes's chronology, yes, JW was born in 1820, and in 1836 he created that JW Dant label we see today. But in the 1850s, you're probably aware, is when the Louisville and Nashville Railroad began to run from Louisville to Nashville down to New Orleans. And so what JW did in Marion County, he moved his still closer to the railroad tracks to show how savvy he was from a business perspective. And that's what created Dant Station. It was actually near the railroad tracks, so it eased him getting the barrels onto the train cars. And to this day, right off Highway 52 in Marion County is Dant Station Road. It's about a 2-mile road that terminates. There's about 6 or 7 homeowners on both sides of that road. I've met them all. There are no Dants who reside on Dant Station Road. One of my ulterior motives in doing family research is to maybe acquire land on Dant Station Road so that we could have it for the foreseeable future. But that's where that comes from. And that's where he settled. And that was the original Dant distillery right there in Marion County, as Wes said.
Cool. I like that sign back there. It's pretty awesome.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's do this. That's a good stopping point for just a second. Let's if you haven't already, go ahead and pour sample one. I think most everybody's got the trick by now, but if you haven't, let's go ahead and pour one. Let's go ahead. Feel free to nose it, sip it, do whatever you like, and let's start getting some opinions on what we get for the nose. What are we getting? Obviously on the palate, mouthfeel, things of that nature. Finish.
So it's bold on the nose, kind of a cherry note.
Yep, I agree with that.
Wes, are you going to share what the mash bill is or was on these by any chance?
Yeah, at the very end. Well, what I'll do is I'll
Because I didn't want to mention that, but I'm sure you've got that data.
yeah, I've got exactly what they both are. I'll go through that in just a little bit. I don't want to.
Yep, understand.
It's weird because until we sample both, if I say one, no matter what order it's in, somebody's going to tie it to the first sample. So
Understand.
but yeah, I'm going to go through all that. Absolutely. Anyone else getting anything on the nose?
Anything? You can just open up your mic. Feel free. Share anything you like.
Like a light cinnamon.
Light cinnamon. Okay.
agree.
Yeah.
We were gonna say cinnamon as well.
Cinnamon. Yeah.
Yep.
I like the nose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He
Nose.
likes the nose. There we go.
Yeah. He likes it now. Nice. Even down to just components he likes. So
I get a little bit of a like a sourdough or a raw bread, kind of like
Yeah.
a little bit of a baking yeast, maybe.
mm-hmm.
Yep. Would agree.
Yeah.
Almost like if you had like a cherry or a fruit pie with a little cinnamon and it hadn't gone into the oven to bake yet, like it's out there, kind of
Mm-hmm.
something your grandma would make homemade.
Yeah. All right, let's taste it. Here we go.
To me, it follows the nose. To me,
It does. Yeah.
nice
Yeah,
cherry.
I
up
like
front,
it.
mid spice.
Definitely.
Phil likes it.
You get that cinnamon too. And it's kind of got a little heat to it, but it feels kind of like a cinnamon type of heat. There's different types, sometimes you get the really
Yeah, it's not an ethanol heat by
spiky.
any
Yeah.
means.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
Nice long finish,
Mhm.
but it's
Yeah.
a good
Sticks around.
finish.
Yeah.
Yeah, the finish is heavy cinnamon. It's almost, I'm not a fan of them, but I've had them, but it's almost like those people that used to make those cinnamon toothpicks.
Oh yeah. I
And
did
you
back
put it
in
on,
the day.
you put it
That
on
was
the
a good
back of your-
business.
yeah, you put it on the back of your tongue. That's exactly what it,
Third grade.
tastes like
That's
to me.
good business, man.
yeah, cinnamon sticks.
Yeah. Heck yeah.
That's good.
It is good. Yeah.
Anyone else? Any more nosing, tasting notes?
It's sweeter than I expected off the
It was-
nose.
It was what? I'm sorry.
I said sweeter.
A little sweeter. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. A little sugary sweet. Honey.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? Now that you say that, it does kind of have it's a nice mouthfeel. It's got a little like a honey thickness, like you're talking, kind of lingers. Like it's still kind of, I can still get that cinnamon on the back of the tongue. Interesting.
Yeah. It does stick with you. So
The cinnamon seems to stop at the back of the throat. It doesn't really continue on to like the chest or anything like
I
that.
agree.
It's
I
interesting.
agree.
Like
Yeah.
a Kentucky hug.
but it doesn't go like all the way
Unlike-
down. Yeah, it kind of sits in the really kind of me for on the center of the
Front
palate
palate.
then more.
Yeah, and to me, that's an excellent point. And to me, that's the prime difference in what I call a flavor heat hug versus just an ethanol heat hug. So that ethanol heat hug is the one that just kind of like runs through your body and burns your chest up, and you're like, what's going on? I don't, why have I got a fever? But like when the heat is like from flavor, to me, it does exactly that. It stops right at the back of the tongue, and it doesn't follow through like the rest of your system. Like it's that's a great point. Anyone else before we jump on through the history?
That's a pretty good start you got there.
That
Wes.
is a good. That's a
Yeah.
good start. I'll take it. All right. So in 1849, not 1949, 1849, Dant married Ann Ballard, and together they produced 10 children, which seems like a crazy amount today, but back then that was pretty common, I think. 7 boys, 3 girls. And during that time, and as the years progressed, the popularity of his whiskey grew. And so obviously, so did the need for a high operational output. And around 1872, he produced the first barrel of a new brand called Yellowstone. So what's ironic about this is, I don't know if it was our last event or the one before, but we actually went through a Yellowstone Dusty. And Steve Beam was on. So this is part of that. What I love about the history of Kentucky bourbon is so many of the families intermingle and Dance and Beams and are is probably as intertwined as any 2 bourbon families you could find out there anywhere for sure. American whiskey for all that matters. So yeah, Yellowstone came out 1872. In 1870, he managed to save enough money to build a new distillery. I think that's the distillery Tim was talking about. So this is where is kind of he's not an engineer by trade back then, but as a guy who was ingenious and understood how to build things and how to think like from an engineering standpoint. This distillery took advantage of gravity basically. So the mash tub was higher than the fermenters. So all he had to do was just use a large pipe, able to fill the tubs without pumping. That was the process back then. Was they used a lot of pumps. He's like, no, we're not going to use pumps. We're going to use gravity. So we're going to put one higher than the other and let gravity take its course. The same process was used in the bottling or the barreling. And the whiskey was filtered by gravity to the tank and to the bottling line. And then, after the Bottled and Bond Act passed, they had a warehouse near the distillery. It became a bonded warehouse. And at that point, like most brands, once the Bottled and Bond Act passed, anyone that presented and made whiskey under those rules and regulations, it gave him basically added respectability and those brands and products within the marketplace.
Yeah. Hey, Wes, I wonder, boy, because I just got to thinking about the fact that, his cooperage is there and he's making them. And of course, there weren't the set of standards that we have today. You have to use a brand new charred oak barrel and stuff like that.
Right.
But the fact he was using new cooperage, not necessarily charred, but new cooperage, versus you could use anything at that point. A lot of times the barrel was a vessel that might have been used to haul nails or fish or whatever.
Yep.
Before that. So the fact he was using new cooperage probably made for better whiskey than you could find out there.
I think between the Dant brand and between the Yellowstone brand, it's one of the things we learned during the Yellowstone event that for a long time, definitely in Kentucky, and then at one point pretty widespread, the whiskey that he was making through those 2 brands, and then obviously his descendants after he retired and passed, were the most popular whiskeys that were out there.
Mm-hmm.
You get into late 1800s, 1900s, pre and post prohibition, Yellowstone and Dant, those were as high selling at that time. Maker's Mark's not around. Jim Beam wasn't a big deal back then. So it's a lot of these other brands were the top sellers, and especially in the state of Kentucky. But you get in when they started getting into more widespread distribution. I think that's probably a big part of the reason. I think from early on, before the federal regulations required it, I think they had good solid whiskey. They didn't have taint from barrels, used to store fish and whatever the hell else is out there. So yeah, I think that's not I don't think that's by happenstance. I think the fact that he was making his own barrels and had some sort of a cooperage on hand would very much indicate why that was happening. Plus, we know that he was shipping barrels down to New Orleans, down the Mississippi River. We've already, whether you believe the whole Elijah Craig story and all that stuff or not, it doesn't matter. But we know that at some point in fashion, someone charred barrels, and that's how bourbon came to be. So I can't imagine that he wasn't charring to some degree. Now, whether it's a very specific level and it's consistent or not, back in those days, it was probably, we know today when you put whiskey in an uncharred container versus a charred container, you get a totally different quality whiskey, totally different flavors. It's a little rougher. It doesn't take
that char's a filter, so yeah, it's gonna
exactly. It's a little rougher. So I think the assumption would be that he was definitely doing those two things, and I think that's why his whiskey became at some point the most popular for sure.
Yeah.
Let's see where we're at. Oh yeah, 1880s. He actually retired. The company was turned over to his sons, Thomas, Frank, James, Wallace, and George. And like most everyone back then, I don't think there were many people that didn't have a first name, middle initial. A lot of the time it was because in families that big, there weren't as many widespread names. So it's Joseph P. Dant, Joseph W. Dant. It's like, the middle name often was the separator amongst family members and things of that nature. And so they continued to grow the Dant Distilling Company. And in 1897, the company became incorporated. In 1902, Joseph Dant died, but the company and the family brand name kind of thrived under the leadership of George. So George kind of the siblings kind of stepped up and became the de facto leader, for lack of better terms. In 1912, they opened up the Taylor and Williams distillery in Gethsemane to produce Yellowstone that was separate from J.W. Dant due to increased volume. So at this time, now they've got two distilleries. And from 1902 until Prohibition, the J.W. Dant Company, they prospered, but at the beginning of Prohibition, the distillery was forced to close. So like everyone else, besides the handful that received their medicinal license, they closed the distillery. However, they sold quite a bit of their stock to Stitzel Weller at the time. And they were part of course, Stitzel was part of the distilleries that kept their medicinal license. And so even though they stopped distilling during Prohibition, the company itself was still allowed to stay active, and they were selling their stores and selling their stocks to Stitzel
it was even
Weller.
prescribed branded too, so you could get a prescription of Yellowstone.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. So as a company, even though they, like most everyone else, they were not making anything new, they were able, because they had the two distilleries, they had a lot of volume, they were able to keep the company going and generate a company income by selling. We know to Stitzel Weller for sure. My guess is there's probably some other medicinal companies that probably they sold to. I don't know, maybe Tim knows that or not, but we know for sure Stitzel. I've actually seen a picture of one of those old Dant pre-Prohibition bottles, and it shows that it was bottled at the Stitzel Weller distillery, or the AP Stitzel at that time. It wasn't Stitzel Weller, it's AP Stitzel. But so Tim, I don't know if you have any light to shed on any of that.
Well, just a couple of footnotes. As you walked everyone through kind of the chronology, the 10 children you referenced, the oldest son was JB, Joseph Bernard. And he's the one who actually started Yellowstone, but it was on the property adjacent to the Gethsemane area. And it was in conjunction with the opening of the Yellowstone National Park in 1872. He did not want to infringe on his dad's name, so he got his marketing guys to come up with a name for his bourbon label. And once they discovered the Yellowstone National Park, they came back and told JB, says, what do you think? He goes, yeah, let's name our bourbon Yellowstone. And of course, then it's to the credit of Steve Beam, who was referenced, and Steve actually descends from J.W. Dant. He and I descend from William Wallace. William Wallace was child number 5 of 10. They then in turn had 55 grandchildren and eventually 112 great-grandchildren.
Okay.
And I'm generation 5. I descend from William Wallace, as does Steve Beam. And then one of the things too that ties into the history, I don't know if anyone has a bourbon library, but one of the books I have in my bourbon library is called Dead Distillers. And if you look closely, whose picture is that on the cover?
J.W. Dant.
J.W.
Yeah.
Dant. And one of the things that I appreciate Steve and Wes allowing me to kind of chime in is because we take a lot of pride, in as you would with your own family and ancestry, to be accurate. You know, no one wants a so-called, pardon my French, bullshitter. And in this book, believe it or not, it references Steve Beam and the fact that Steve Beam married a Dant. Well, Steve Beam has never been married. So it just goes to show you that even these books that are published and some of the experts who supposedly write and give input on these books and publications are not always accurate. And we have kind of a mantra in the Dant family that no one should know more about the Dant family than the Dant family. And so we take that very serious because eventually when we create, hopefully within the few years to come, our own visitor center on our new venture, we want to create a kind of a mini Dant history museum. And of course, within that museum, you'll have all of this history, but to gain credibility, you want to make sure that it's accurate and it's truthful and it's not fabricated, because so much of the whiskey industry, as Stephen and Wes have touched on, is lore. It's like you almost don't know what to believe, or is that really true? And so we take that very seriously. So I appreciate Steve and Wes walking down that path chronologically. And then after Prohibition, and you're right, George, which was the youngest of the sons, ran the Dant distillery until 1920. Prohibition kicked in. And in 1933, when Prohibition ended, George then reopened that original Dant distillery over in Marion County. Ironically, near the Gethsemane Cold Spring site, my grandfather, W.W. Dant, who descended, of course, from Wallace, and that was William Washington, he started his own distillery in 1934 on the Gethsemane property. And he's the one that built the 120-foot water tower that's in place today on that very land. And this happens to be a half-pint bottle of William Washington Dant's 5-star special that he created in 1934. And believe it or not, George, his uncle, sued him because my grandfather put Dant on the label and his own uncle George felt like that was infringing on JW's name. So he sued my grandfather and shut him down. My grandfather stopped producing his W.W. Dant 5-star special. Now, my grandfather continued to run the distillery in the Gethsemane until it sold in the 1940s. But it just goes to show you those family feuds are real and were real at that time.
Yeah.
It's actually, I've never seen that bottle of the W.W. Dant.
That's cool. Yeah.
That is very cool.
Mhm.
Yep.
It's very all right. Let's do this. Let's jump into number 2 here. It's a nice time to break.
Okay.
Well, the nose is a nice contrast to number 1.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody picks up on a difference. Really mellow,
Mm-hmm.
not overbearing.
Yeah.
The colors, by the
like
way,
a,
Wes, when I look at
like
the two colors, the colors are pretty similar, by the way. I'm sure
Yeah,
everyone
they
looks at the
are.
color as well.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot, I don't think, a lot of differentiation in the color of the two.
I get like a more of a citrusy type fruit on the nose on this one. Not,
Yeah, me too.
Not a cherry or stone fruit, something a little crisper.
Citrus. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or maybe if it's not citrus, it's possibly like green apple, maybe something a little orange slices of like Swyatt jumped in here. He's camera shy, so he just likes to type in notes.
I don't know him to be shy, so I don't know what's going on there. Maybe he's got a
probably
party.
listening. He's probably not even listening. He's
He,
probably
he
listening
does
to
it. He
Bourbon Daily.
broadcasts right from the living room. So his wife, could be there watching TV on the other side. So yeah.
He's in there watching American Idol, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's
yeah.
funny. It's funny you say that. So I'm actually texting back and forth with a friend of mine who's sitting with Granville and Molly. I don't know the last name, but they were the original owners of OFC from the 1890s.
Oh,
So like I'm
wow.
going back and forth with them at the same time as I'm saying, well, I'm actually talking to the dance right now. This is pretty funny. How convenient that is. So
Is that
I've been
right?
catching them
That's
back
cool.
and forth, but I got the
Yeah.
orange slices right now.
Yeah.
That citrusy note. It's like a heavily sugared citrusy note, but it just popped right in my head when she said the citrus note, Wes.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to taste it.
Don't get orange or fruit on the palate at all.
Also, kind of little bit of chocolate in there on the taste.
Yeah, I would agree.
Mm-hmm.
A little
That's
bit of leather, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely more of an earthy palate, but it's not a cinnamon spice to me. It's like that peppercorn again
Mm-hmm.
on the back.
It's like
a lot-
light oak.
Yeah.
Got
Not
some
a big
oak.
finish like the last one. The last one that kept going. This one's a lot milder for sure.
Yeah, it's a good warm peppery finish, but it doesn't quite get to the back of the throat for me.
Yeah.
I was gonna solicit Jeannie's feedback. Jeannie commented on sample number 1 about its lingering
Yeah.
taste. Jeannie, what do you think about number 2?
Oh, definitely does not linger at all. It's kind of a weird mid palate feel.
I agree.
Like it's almost like there is no mid palate. There's the beginning, and the mid palate is almost like clear, and then almost like watery, and then the end kind of kicks in a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Good feedback.
Mhm. Yeah.
Anyone
It's
else?
almost like a toffee cigar note. There's
Toffee cigar.
there's like a toffee, a coffee, something like that. It's like it's like a dark roasted type of finish that hits you. It reminds me of like I'm smoking a cigar. If I'm getting
Yeah.
a dark wrapped Sumatra cigar without the ash notes at all, the unpleasant stuff.
It's a cigar without the ashtray. Is that what you're saying?
There it is.
Which is a good thing. That's
Yes,
the
because
downside of
tobacco.
cigars. Yeah.
Yeah, I was kind of picking up something similar along the lines of, I almost call it like black powder or something, or cordite, or, spent
Okay.
fireworks. Not unpleasant, but there's like you walk through that cloud on 4th of July kind of going on.
Sure.
I was gonna say that it's not quite like I almost get like a flavor almost like soy sauce, but not like soy sauce. It's kind of like almost like this umami flavor to it, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is not something I've had in much bourbon before.
Yeah.
If I
I
had
thought
to
the-
guess, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Wes. I thought the placement of the heat was very similar to the first one,
I agree.
as it kind of grabs you up front, and then there's no drop on the heat at all. But the hug doesn't last as long either.
No, it does not. Definitely does not.
Which, given the age difference between these, I find that pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think it's on the finish, the first one is kind of more of a long distance race, and the second one's a sprint. Like it gets there quick. They're about the same, but one doesn't seem like it hits harder than the other. It's just the difference in longevity, I think.
Hmm.
There's a difference between quick and fast.
There you go.
Good analogy. Yep.
Yeah. Bill just
Bill,
blew my
that's
mind right there.
that's the
Yeah.
most I've heard Bill say on one of these.
Bill, he's been waiting for this moment. It's all been building up to that.
It's been
so
Bill, I don't know how many events, but he's waited for this one moment.
he's just gonna
Talk about the
sign
finish.
out now. Yeah.
Nice.
Mic drop time.
All right. Anybody else want to talk about number 2 real quick before we move on?
I like
Any of
it.
there you go. That's more like it.
Mhm.
I just have to say, I do like it. I think it's a very unusual taste. I really don't come across this taste like hardly at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is it's such a different drink than the first one that I think that's what kind of, it makes me wonder if we'd have tried 2 before 1, would the opinions have been any different? But they're so drastically different. Like there's not really any, to me, there's not any notes that match either one. Like
Right.
there's not, like both of them, neither one to me have that traditional Kentucky caramel vanilla type of thing. Like neither one of these in a blind tasting you would ever say is Old Forester or Jim Beam based.
Right.
Like it's
No.
just not. It's not. You probably wouldn't say it's Wild Turkey. It's not a heavy rye bourbon finish type of thing. They're both distinctly different, no matter what
Right.
they are.
Right.
If my ancestors had made either one of these, I'd be proud of it.
Oh, I think they're both. They're both.
You know what I'm saying?
Bill is Mr. Soundbite tonight.
He is, man.
He's killing it.
Tim, you're gonna have to go back and review this and find
I'll
out
do,
if he
I'll do
was
a double
hammered.
cheers, double toast to Bill.
There we go. Double toast to Bill, the star of the
done.
show.
Yeah.
I drink to that.
Yeah, Tim, you have to go back and re-listen to this later and find out if you think he was hammered before he jumped on or not.
Yes, maybe that's the key. Bill, maybe Bill pre-gamed.
Pre-game for the
Question, I know a quick question as we start to maybe wind down, but and clarify these. But I know Steve is in the St. Louis area. Wes, I think you live in Louisville.
Yeah.
I grew up in Louisville. I live in Dallas, Texas now, and actually, I think Wes and I are Hilltoppers, right? Wes, I went to Western
That's correct.
Kentucky,
That's
class of
correct.
1978. But can I get a show of hands with all the other viewers? Who lives or who is from Kentucky?
I think it's going to be Bill,
just Bill
Betsy, and
and
Nikki for sure.
Betsy and Nikki. So just because there's quite a few out of staters.
Yep.
So
Oh,
Bill
yeah.
and Nikki and Betsy, are you familiar with Marion County or Highway 52? Have you guys been down to see literally the dance station area? Because it does exist.
I have not. I have not. I've been hearing about it, and it's definitely on my bucket list of things to do.
Well, you're not even that far away. You're in Shepherdsville.
I was going to say, you're in Shepherdsville.
Oh yeah,
Tim,
There's always Colorado and New Mexico, and
yeah.
Yeah. He'll drive to Colorado, but he won't go down to dance station.
Yeah. But actually, one of the quicker ways to get there is on 65 South, rather than take the Bardstown exit, go to the next exit, which is Boston, Kentucky.
Yeah.
So you can back roads, and that's kind of a more efficient way to get there. But I also caution you, and I say this because I'm sure that you're familiar with the area, but Dant Station and the original distillery that we've talked about, that J.W. Dant started, is not the same as Dant Crossing, which is getting a lot of publicity right now with regards to our current distillery and the amphitheater that we put in. So please don't confuse Dant Crossing with Dant Station. Dant Crossing is in Nelson County. Dant Station, the original distillery, is in Marion County. Now, it's only about 10 to 15 minutes apart driving, but it's 2 different locations. And then back to what Wes said, after Prohibition, George Dant operated the original Dant distillery, and then simultaneously, my grandfather over in Nelson County at Gethsemane was operating his distillery, where he produced the 5-star special. But a lot of people, even my own family, assume that Dant Crossing was the same as Dant Station, and that's not true.
Wow.
For those of
Okay.
you who live in the locale. And Wes, I know you know that, but I wanted to clarify.
Yeah, I do know that. The only reason I knew that is a couple of years ago, once you guys made the announcement of what you were doing, I started like wanting to know on a map exactly where Dant Station, where Gethsemane, where the whole thing was. And of course,
Right.
as you get close, you pull in closer to the map, all the little oddball areas come up, and then everything I'd read and everything I'd researched started hitting me on a map, and I had a really good understanding of how close everything was and how the family was able to do what they did, back in the day,
Right.
Yeah. I think the legend has a comment.
no, I didn't know the difference, but yeah.
Who again?
Hey, so I have a question,
Yeah,
and
Jeannie, go ahead.
forgive me, I'm from Virginia.
Quite all
So
right.
I
That's
don't
okay.
know anything about that, but I know I went to Log Still. And so now I'm getting kind of confused because I was there and they said something about they were going to have JW Dant whiskey or whatever. So I'm a little confused about all of that when you were saying Dant Crossing, Dant Station and everything.
So to clarify, Jeannie, are you saying that you've already visited our Log Still distillery?
So yes, I've been to Logstill, yes.
Okay, well, Log still sits on a campus that we call Dant Crossing. I don't know if you
Okay.
saw the signage. So how recently were you there?
I was there like last fall. So I saw that like the amphitheater and everything like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, now that's the Gethsemane site, and you probably saw just a mile away is the Gethsemane monk monastery. If you know that, so that's another landmark.
Yep.
Well,
That's Monk's Road, correct?
That's the tie-in, correct, Wes?
Yeah.
But Jeannie, to clarify, you were at Log Still Distillery on Dant Crossing at Gethsemane, and that's the same 300 acres that my grandfather established his distillery after Prohibition. That's in Nelson County, New Haven. That is not the same as the original Dant Distillery over in Marion County, where Dant Station Road is.
Okay. Okay.
And the water tower, did you see the water tower?
Yes. Yes.
It's got the Dant name on it.
Right.
It says Dant family owned.
Uh-huh.
That's because my cousin Wally reacquired that land a few years ago and started this startup venture because we as a family and cousins have always talked about getting back into the business, very similar to Steve Beam. You know, to Steve's credit, he and his brother Paul went up to St. Louis to Luxco and basically reacquired or acquired Yellowstone and started Limestone Branch, which is in Lebanon.
Mhm.
And in his showroom, he has an abbreviated Dant family tree on the wall. So the beams acknowledge the Dant connection, which is
Okay.
really nicely done if you get a chance to go to Limestone Branch.
Yeah, I've been there too.
But,
Yeah.
but Jeannie, does that help discern the
Yes.
difference?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure.
Yeah, I like to,
What I was-
oh, go ahead, go ahead.
What I was gonna say is last July, my wife and I were down at the crossing. We spent 2 days down there at the B&B.
Oh, great.
Nice.
We had the big room on the first floor. Best run B&B I've ever been to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there
well,
you go.
thanks for your support. I really appreciate that because it's only going to get bigger and better. We're opening new B&Bs. This year, we're going to open up a restaurant probably in July or August. We just put in the 30-foot tall column still a few weeks ago, which is in place now right adjacent to the tasting room that overlooks that amphitheater that the Jeannie saw. And then we're going to open up our brand new banquet facility with its own attached chapel for weddings.
Yep.
And I actually got invited to a wedding in October. And one of the first weddings that will be held there is John Dant, who's the son of J.P. Dant. One of J.W.'s sons, John Proctor Dant, had his own label. Well, John Proctor Dant III is still alive and well down in Tampa, Florida.
Oh, wow.
His son, John, was the very first person to propose to his girlfriend on the lake. The Jeannie saw the lake next to the cottage way back in, I think it was May or June of last year. So he's going to come back and get married at the chapel at Dant Crossing in October of this year.
Yeah, I'll tell you something funny, Tim. When the first day we were there, we checked in and then we left to do some stuff. And we come back and we're going to go back in the building and there's a lady that kind of stopped us. And we got all kinds of questions about what we were doing and where we were going. And I'm like, who the heck are you? You know? So my wife finally got through to her that we had the room on the bottom floor.
Right.
So we get in the house and there's stuff all over the place. I said, I asked my wife, I said, who are these people? They act like they own the place. We're not the only people that, I mean, hell, we got the biggest room here.
Wow.
Come to find out, it was a bunch of relatives from Texas.
Oh,
So they were
wow.
all dance.
There you go.
So the next morning we got to meet
The Texas
everybody.
ranch. Yeah.
I'll be.
I said, well, I guess, yeah, they do own the building now. We got to meet them all at breakfast. And then we were invited to take a tour of the property with them. So we got to see everything. And this was
That's
about a
great.
week or two before the amphitheater opened up. They were still finishing up the mansion.
Sure.
And so we got to see that and everything under construction. And yeah, that was fun.
Hey, Rick, that room you stayed in is now known as the Legend Suite, by the way.
The Legend Suite.
That's right. That's what you have to ask for when you book it.
But
Yeah.
did you notice the railroad tracks just beyond the amphitheater?
Oh, yeah. And it's gonna run from the museum.
Yes, the
Railroad
Kentucky
Museum.
Railway Museum is just a
Yeah.
few minutes away in New Haven. So they reactivated that track. So now Wally's going to bring train cars from the New Haven
Yeah.
Museum down
That's so
to
cool.
Dant Crossing. And my brother John, who's the lead architect, he lives over in Mississippi. And he and I, of course, grew up in Louisville, but he's the lead architect, and he's designing a train depot that would be very similar to the depot that was there back when my grandfather operated after Prohibition. So the train car will bring you up to the depot. You'll depart the train and then go right up to the amphitheater. And then we're also thinking about converting some of the train cars and making them stationary and converting them into bed and breakfast potentially.
That's cool. That's cool.
No,
A lot more coming. So I really appreciate everyone's support.
if you've never been to Hard Truth in Indiana,
No.
They've got quite a campus.
Where
They do
where
ATV tours on the property, and they got a small amphitheater and a restaurant that'll see what, like 500 people.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Oh yeah. The restaurant's huge. So, yeah.
But anyway, I was telling what's Wally's brother's name?
Oh, his cousin Charlie. Charlie's his cousin.
Charles is our cousin. He's the one that grew up in that area.
Because I met him down there.
Yes, Charles.
I was telling him about Hard Truth. I said they got a great setup, a great business, and everything. I said, but your place, it will be so much more of a destination than they will be, and they're out in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
And people flock from all over the place. I said, once you get this thing up online, totally, you won't be able to keep people away from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. But I know I really appreciate your acknowledging that and supporting that. And of course, the city of Bardstown and the communities of New Haven and Gethsemane, to their credit, they've really embraced what we're doing. It really, and of course, Wally and Lynn, my cousin Lynn, her dad was my godfather. And then Charles are the three key players. And really, to their credit, they're really giving back to.
Is Lynn the one who runs the B&B?
I'm sorry?
Is she the one who runs the B&B?
No, but she is the COO. She's the chief operating officers. So. No, great.
Interesting.
Good stuff.
All right. Well, I'm going to try to finish off this history right here, and then we're going to start guessing as to what's going on with these whiskeys. Real quick before I do that, though, Tim had asked earlier, I do want to remind everyone what we are sipping. So one of the samples is a 1969 8-year 86 proof Dant out of a decanter, and the other is a modern day recent bottled and bond, obviously 4-year-old 100 proof. So that's the two those are the two samples we're tasting tonight. Just so I wanted to make sure that was clear. So some of this that we're getting ready to talk about, Tim went over. I'm just going to kind of recap it, and then I have a kind of a side piece of history that I want to go through really, really quick and get Tim's opinion on that, because again, the Dant family tree has a ton of branches, and it's kind of interesting to see how, much like the Beams, they were all centric to their family branded distilleries, but there were offshoots of people that went on to do things elsewhere. So I want to get through that. So as Tim's already said, after Prohibition, JW Dant Distillery opened back up, but one of the brothers, Bernard, built a new facility called the Taylor and Williams Distillery, and that was in Louisville area, Jefferson County, basically. And that was where they kind of separated, and they started concentrating the Yellowstone brand there, and they continued doing the Dant brands back in Bullitt County and Marion County area at the Gethsemane and the JW Dant Distillery area.
Right.
Bernard died a few years later. I think he died in 89, if my research is correct, somewhere around that area. Not 1989, but it's the age of 89. Sorry. And obviously, like a lot of distilleries and a lot of distilling companies post Prohibition, and the key part of bourbon history that I think is overshadowed, because I think at some point, if allowed to operate without any interruptions for another 10, 15, 20 years, a lot of companies that tried to reopen post Prohibition probably could have survived and thrived. But not long after Prohibition happened, they only had 6 or 7 good years of distilling, and in a lot of places the distilleries had been raided, and bootleggers and feds, and they had to reconstruct. In some cases they had burnt down and they had to rebuild. And by the time all that happened and they invested all that money, World War II hit, and the government came in and forced everyone to stop making whiskey, maybe not in totality, but in a large amount. And they started having to make, fuel alcohols. So I think the combination of those two events, so close together from a periodic standpoint, drove a lot of families and companies to just not be able to recover anytime quickly after those two events. So by the time World War II ended, both the distilleries sold to larger companies. J.W. Dant sold to Armand Hammer, not Arm and Hammer like the baking soda, but Armand Hammer. And then they sold it off. That was in the 40s, I think, late 40s. They sold it off to Shinley in 52. The Taylor and Williams distillery was sold to Glenmore, is basically the way it worked. Then ultimately, they both went to United Distillers. And then obviously the Yellowstone brand ended up going to Lexco, now back home with the Beam. And then obviously we know that Tim doesn't need me to tell anybody, but the J.W. Dant brand unfortunately still resides with Heaven Hill. They've been, I would say they've been, in my opinion, as a consumer and a fan, they've been a good steward of the bourbon. It's still good quality whiskey and bourbon. So I think they
Great value, great,
great value, and without having any family ties to the brand, I think there's a lot of brands, and we can name them off. Old Taylor would be one. You can name off a lot of legendary brands that got caught up in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s sell off to different companies that were reduced down to 2 and 3 year old whiskey, down to 80 proof, bottom shelf. Old Crow's probably is the biggest example of that, at least in my personal opinion. But I think overall, as a steward of the brand, Heaven Hills at least honored it by putting in still a bottled and bond whiskey at a good value, and we're one of these two we're sampling. Is that
still has that classic look too? It's
has
got
that classic look.
Yeah,
So
the label's
it's,
cool.
So I think that's kind of where they've ended up. Obviously, Tim, if you want, I know you've talked about it a little bit. I do want to go over one other piece of history, and if nothing else, it's a personal.
I got one for you too, Wes.
Okay,
the Arm & Hammer is the guy who the baking soda guy or whatever.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a playoff of his name. So
okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So
I didn't know
he
it was
owned
the
all
same
kinds
guy.
of businesses. He's a big time American business person.
That makes sense.
And he lived well into his 90s and was active. I don't know, maybe 15 years ago now. He's passed away, but
okay.
He was. That's him. So he owned a very diverse group of companies. So
and he didn't own these very long at all. I mean, he sold off to Shinley pretty quick. Once Shinley, which is part of the big 4 or 5, started making their way late 40s and 50s and acquiring everybody and anybody, anyone that wasn't going to make whiskey their prime product, pretty well sold off to those guys. He's also the dad of actor Armie Hammer. Is that true?
Yeah.
No, I didn't know.
I don't know if he's the dad. I know he's related. Is he the dad? I don't think he's the dad. I think he's the same lineage, but
maybe grandfather. I think there may have been like wife number 2 or 3 or 4.
Yeah, that sounds something like that. Yeah.
So
he's definitely related though, for sure. 100%. Yeah.
Okay. So Tim, there's another piece of information I kind of dug up. I wanted to run it by the group, obviously, but you specifically. So John Proctor Dant, he went out and started yet another distillery, or bought another distillery in St. Francis, Kentucky, is what my research says. And he called it the Old Danton Distillery. And kind of and I've seen old labels with this brand name called Old Danton.
Mm-hmm.
And then it sounds like he had the distillery for a few years. He sold it out. He moved to Louisville, and he started a wholesale liquor business, is what my research says. I think after repeal of Prohibition, he actually built another distillery at Meadowlawn in Jefferson County. And he called it the J.P. Dant Distillery. Oh, the John P. Dant Distillery.
Correct.
And then he leased another distillery who I had never heard of in Anchorage, Kentucky, called the Grosskirth.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of incorporated those two into the Meadowlawn Distilling Company. And they were pretty big operations. There were 6 warehouses, total capacity of about 7,500, 8,000 barrels. And there are two brands that came out of those that I have seen through my research and investigation of old labels and so forth. Old Boone, which I think years later after that, I think that was one of the labels that Van Winkle tried to bottle some whiskey out of the Hoffman under that. And I think he got into some legal trouble before it ever came out too big a quantity. And the Distiller's Choice, which was yet another label that ended up getting sucked up by either Heaven Hill or Barton or Sazerac or someone like that. And I don't think it's around anymore, but that was just kind of a weird offset piece of the Dant history that I ran into that I just wanted to put a note of and kind of bring it up if we're going through history.
Yeah, and that same John Proctor Dant, who is JW's third child, it was John Proctor Jr. who continued to run that. And then he's the one who had John Proctor III, who now lives in Tampa. But it was John Proctor Jr. who actually moved from Louisville to Florida because he wanted to get out of the business, because when he was operating John P. Dant, he was actually sued by Shinley Distillers, because at that time Shinley owned JW Dant, and they tried to sue John P. Dant, and John P. Dant won the lawsuit, been proving that no one could take away his use of his own name. But he had it with the industry, so he moved to Florida, and then had John Proctor III, who I had referenced, who still is alive and well, and it's his son who will get married up at Dant Crossing in October. But Wes, you live in Louisville, and for those of you who have gone through Louisville, you're probably familiar with Bardstown Road, and there's a very cool bar on Bardstown Road called the Back Door.
Oh yeah.
I think he just froze up again.
Some of the screens were freezing, but to repeat, the Back Door Bar is located on Bardstown Road in Louisville, and it's operated and owned by John Williams Dant III. So if you go back to Joseph Bernard, JW's first son, who started Yellowstone, he had a son named Sam, who had a son named John Williams Dant Sr., who had a son named John Williams Dant Jr., who had a son named John Williams Dant III, who owns the Back Door Bar on Bardstown Road. You've got to go to this bar. Steve, when you get to Louisville, go to the Back Door. He's got caricatures of all of his customers on the wall.
Oh.
And he has a picture, of course, of JW Dant, because he realizes he descends from Joseph Bernard. And
I'm a walking caricature, so I should belong on that wall.
With your beard, you're
yeah, exactly. The glasses.
I can talk to John, because John basically is my distant cousin. He just recently put a picture of Wally on the wall, so now Wally's picture is on the wall.
I got to go on that wall. Yeah.
And Wes, you've got to go to the Back Door Bar. It's on Bardstown Road.
I've been years ago. It's back. It's connected to that mall or that theater.
It's called Mid-City Mall.
Mid-City Mall. That's the one. That's right.
And it's John Williams Dant III, and he is, you talk about the complex family tree. I happen to be the Dant family historian. I have a Word document with 1,400 names on it, all vetted as descendants of J.W. Dant.
Wow.
So while we're doing, actually, you know what? I'll save it for after the event, because it has nothing to do with the bourbon industry, but I'm friends with some, they're not Dants by last name, but they are by marriage and family. I want to ask you about Tim after we get finished with the event.
Yeah, shoot me a note, Wes. And again, I would encourage anyone who's tuning in tonight. Once again, thank you for just being a part of this and listening. But as you just embrace your own ancestry and your own families, it obviously means a lot to me. So I really appreciate the time. But shoot me a text or an email. My information's on social media. And I would love to answer questions or clarify things for anyone who might be interested. So Steve, thanks again. And Wes, thanks again.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir, for being on. So if anyone has any of your samples left, if you want to go ahead and take another second round, a lot of times when we go back through these again, we'll get different notes and so forth. One thing I do want to make clear, we went through a ton of the history. The item, the one we're sampling, that's the Dusty, the 1969. That particular bottle was distilled by Shinley. So when Shinley owned the brand, they actually distilled and bottled JW Dant from two distilleries, one being their Stag distillery, which is now Buffalo Trace. So for a time, J.W. Dant was actually distilled when it was owned by Shinley, was distilled out of the Stag Distillery. So the sample tonight came out of that distillery, just to let everybody know.
Cool.
Nice.
Just a piece of information here. So anyone else have any other comments, tasting notes, or anything, if they've gone back, or we think we're ready to vote?
I think I'm ready. Yeah, we're ready to vote, I think.
And again, if you guys have any more, we'll do some questions and so forth after we do the voting and opinions. But if you have anything, feel free to throw it in the chat and we'll go through it when we get through as well.
Yeah, so we'll do the voting, then maybe live Q&A, and then talk about the upcoming events. And then, of course, we do turn off the recorder. Wes and I'll stick around for a little bit. And if anybody just wants to talk whiskey, we do that as well. So
yeah. So reminder, when I call to you, I think most everybody knows, but if you haven't been on, we're asking for two things. We want you, and it doesn't matter what order, tell us which of the two were your favorite, one or two, and which one you think was the Dusty. They don't obviously have to be the same, but
but they could
like
be.
They could be, they could not be. We like to keep track of what the majority thinks is their favorite. And more importantly, we like to keep track of who's good at guessing which is the Dusty and who is not.
Right.
So let's go to Mr. Chatty Cathy, Mr. Bill.
Bill. All right.
2 and 2.
Two and two.
Meaning
Okay.
two's your favorite and two's the Dusty.
Two's the favorite, two's the Dusty.
All
Our
right.
longest current streak is Mike Gascamp. Mike, because we're not so good at really keeping records, we're going to assume you're honest. And what's your streak at right now?
I'm glad you asked because I actually have no idea. So
I think
I'd say
I think he's at like 6, I believe.
I was
Six,
gonna
okay.
say, I think it's 5 and going for 6, or it's 6 going
Okay.
for 7. But
We'll give you 6 going on 7. How about that?
all right, I'll
There,
take
you
it.
just negotiated better. So there you go. 6.
Hey, there it is.
All right.
All right, let's go to Jeannie.
I
Junior.
totally agree. 2 and 2.
2
and
and
two.
2.
Okay.
Let's go with Mr. Swyatt.
I want to zag with everybody on this one, go different, but I agree with I'm going chalk, 2 and 2. 2 is my favorite. 2 being the
Right.
Dusty as well.
All right, we're gonna
Well,
start a conga line of Mesas. Let's start with Robert.
All right.
So which one's first? The one I think is the Dusty or my favorite?
Either, yeah, whichever
don't
one
remember
doesn't
now.
matter. Yeah, whichever one you
Uh,
want.
I think 2 is the Dusty,
Okay,
but I'm actually going to say that number 1 is my favorite.
Okay.
right. Let's go to Nate.
I think 2 is the Dusty, and my favorite is whichever one I tasted last, I think. I tasted the 2 most recently. I kept going back and forth, but I'll say 2.
Okay. By the narrowest of
All right.
margins. Yeah.
By the narrowest of margins, as close as you can probably get. Where is Kent? There he is.
He's here. Yeah.
He's been quiet tonight.
Kent? 2 is the Dusty. I have a hard time with the favorite. Number 2 would be dangerous because I could drink it all night.
It's an
long and
easy
not
drinker.
even
Easy
didn't even
drinker.
think I was drinking, and I would be in trouble. I really like both of them. They're
Yeah, I do.
different, but the tasting notes for me, they're very similar taste. Their mouthfeel, their finish are totally different. But to me, their flavors are pretty close. I like both of them a lot. Hey, can somebody just send me a couple bottles of each?
Is that a
please?
half vote for each one?
Kent, where do you live?
You got the right guy on. Yeah,
Boomer.
there you go.
Kent, where do you live, Kent?
He's Oklahoma. Yeah.
I'm Norman, Oklahoma.
Well, I'm in Dallas.
Oh, that's
Drive
bad,
down,
right?
We can meet
Bitter
halfway
rivals.
and come
Texas
on
and
down.
Oklahoma. Whoa.
Yeah,
I've got a
bitter
whole
rivals.
inventory. I've got an
Look at
entire
this.
inventory in my house.
We've got Texas and
Well-
Oklahoma getting along. We've changed the world tonight.
There you go.
Wow.
The people are there. The states are the ones that are weird and
Yeah.
all that.
All right.
All right, let's go to Betsy.
Officially, by the way, I put down Kent as 1, only
Okay.
because we had 2 Mesas that were kind of split. So let's so we had one go 2 and then we'll have one go 1. So that
Yep.
feels fair. Okay.
The powerful trifecta of the Mesas.
Yes, the Mesas.
All right, let's go Betsy and Nikki.
Okay.
So we actually both agree on this. We think number 2 is the Dusty, and we both like number 1 better.
Yes.
Just that finish. It was just really good. So
Yeah,
that's
we
okay.
rarely agree on what our favorite is, but this one we did.
yeah.
Okay.
All
Wes,
right.
just a quick check in here. Dusty, 2's running away with it. It's 8-zip right now. Now on the favorite though, we're split. We're tied right here, 4-4 with that
All right.
last vote. So yeah.
Let's go, Mr. Whitlatch.
As I'm sitting here taking little bitty sips, I keep going back to number 1. So I'm going to say number 1's my favorite. And I also think that's the Dusty.
Okay. Okay, that's good. We will have someone will win tonight. Now it could be a lot of people or it could be just Bob. So we'll see.
All right, let's go to Andy.
Andy.
Yep.
All right.
I am saying 2 is my favorite and 2 is the Dusty.
All right.
All right,
Yeah.
Legend, you're up, sir.
2 and 2.
2 and
Go
2.
Double
Okay.
deuce. Double deuce.
2 has taken the lead again for the favorite, by the way. So
So I think
barely.
outside of host and Tim, the only person left is the reigning champ, Mike Gascamp.
okay. No, did you get
Oh, I'm
you get
sorry.
John? You got
Yeah, let's go ahead and get Mike. We'll go ahead and get Mike and then I'll get John.
Yeah, so I'm gonna say 2 is a Dusty, and I'm kind of along with most of the Maces, is I'm kind of split on the favorite. So it's pretty much 6-4 and pick 'em for me. So I'll say 1 was my favorite.
Okay.
All right.
Deadlock.
All right. John's hiding in the shadows there. Let's get him out.
All right.
That's where I like to do it. Be in the shadows. Choose the Dusty. And I will tell you, if those of you that have had a chance to have the Old Crow Chessman, just think about some of those funky notes you get.
Yeah.
Like, it reminds me eerily of that. But I have to admit, I think I like 1 a little bit better tonight.
1 better.
All right.
Okay. Okay.
All right, Steve, you're up, sir.
Well, I like the funky notes of number 2, and again, I do think that because it comes as it being the Dusty, so that's my official vote on that. And I thought 1 was excellent too. By the way, I really enjoyed number 1, and I didn't think it was going to be beat as my favorite, but 2 just because it was unusual, I like that one better. So,
Okay.
yes. Does that just leave now?
So
Tim?
it's just Tim and myself. I know what they are, but I am gonna give an opinion on which one I like the best.
Okay.
This is to me, they're I like them both. These are the choices. What mood are you in? So like if I'm in the mood for a more fruit forward, which is typically where my palate likes to go to, then I would pick 1. But then there's some times where like, you may be setting out at night, it's cool by a campfire or something. You kind of want something a little more earthy and a little different. I would probably go with 2, but I like them both. That's just my opinion of the 2, actually. So,
Yeah.
Tim, we're going to let you vote as well, sir, and then I'm going to let everybody know what's going on.
Yeah, I'm going to align my picks with Betsy and Nikki because I do prefer number 1.
Okay.
They're both great. But as soon as I opened up number 1, I just enjoyed it. And then 2 is the Dusty.
Where's the Dusty? Okay.
All right. What's the final tally there, Steve?
All right. The final tally looks like
Okay.
this. I think most people get a good feel for where we stand on the Dusty. So the Dusty ended up being 14-1. So Bob Whitlatch could, at the end of this thing, have the longest streak going. So he's by himself. He's the only one who went more one. We ended up in a deadlock. It's not an 8-8 on the favorite, which is kind of cool. It says we've got some good whiskey tonight.
Well, it kind of goes along with everybody's tasting notes and what we all said. Like there wasn't one that really jumped out, I think, to most people as being better. They were just different.
Yeah.
All right. Yep. So this is no shocker here. Number 2 is the Dusty.
2 is the Dusty. There you go. Hey-o.
Hey.
Congratulations to Mike Gascamp, up to 7. He's
All right.
chasing the Legend. The Legend did reeled off 16 straight. So
And you can't catch the Legend.
That's great, Mike. Congratulations, man. Keep
Yeah.
the momentum.
Yeah,
Right. Keep it up.
very fun.
One of these days, Wes is going to give me a hard one, and then I'm
I'm
going
going to. Don't worry. I'm going to.
He's got some good ones coming up. So
Well, the good news is I can go to my local liquor store and buy my favorite. So
That's right.
It's
And
true.
you can just call it a Dusty. It doesn't matter. As long as you think it's a Dusty, that's all that matters, right?
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
When I first nosed and tasted the first one, I was just convinced that that was the one.
Mhm.
And then I tasted, and, you know, and nosed the second one. It was like, oh shit, this is
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so what's interesting is part of the fun that I have is deciding from event to event, do I want to make one the Dusty or number two? And what I look at is exactly what Bill's talking about. If I'm convinced that if I make the Dusty number one and they drink it first, there's no way like they're going to guess that it's actually it. But if I think that it has a fighting chance, I like to mix it up a little bit, but it's always interesting. I spend a lot of time for no reason whatsoever trying to think of how I can try to trick everyone by sampling one before the other one, just to see if I can convince people.
Wes,
No,
they
that's
have
good strategy.
Yeah, it doesn't work off.
Label one like Q and 1 9.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
You know,
Just a totally different numbering style. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe so.
Wes, before we will do a Q&A in a second here if anybody
Yeah.
has any questions for our guests. But when I hit on these, I'm going to throw these out to you again. We have a July one penciled in, but we didn't get the details to it. And then we scheduled an August one. I should have put that in the July one, but I messed
That's
up.
all
'Cause
right.
I was just holding a place. So we'll get that. We
got
one
plenty of
scheduled,
time.
folks. But yes, the first one coming up, you got 3 of them that are official that are out there right now. So next one is May 26th. That's a 1968 Kentucky Tavern. Why do you think that one's going to be special?
Yeah, so for me, it's the which the bottle shape alone doesn't mean shit to what the whiskey is. However, it's a combination of it's an old Dusty from Glenmore.
Yeah.
That's both Glenmore and Medley and Owensboro are very underrated old historic distilleries that, you know, because they're kind of way out in Western Kentucky and Owensboro, they're not quite as known as outside of like whiskey history geeks and so forth. But probably some of the best Dusty whiskey I've ever had was a Dusty Kentucky Tavern. So I'm excited about sharing that history, and more importantly, sharing that whiskey with anyone that jumps on. And then that Captain's bottle is pretty cool. Like it's like a birthday bourbon on steroids. The bottle's like twice as big around, and it's
flatter.
Yeah, I've got it here. Give me one quick second. I'll grab it.
Yeah, it's a cool bottle. It is literally meant to be on a ship. It won't tip over. So you'll see when he pulls this up in just a second here. It's this, you know, big flat bottle. Like I said, kind of most close to birthday bourbon. Yeah, but there you go.
See this guy?
It's cool.
Yeah. So the whole idea, it's called a Captain's bottle because it's literally designed to set on a ship, and it's low base, low center of gravity.
Yeah.
As the ship's turning, it won't tip over. It's not supposed to tip over on you. It just kind of goes back and forth. So this thing is it's pretty bad. It's a 8-year age statement. We're gonna,
if that tips over, you got worse problems than than some spilled whiskey. That's for sure.
Yeah, this event is not so much trying to trick people, because I think it's going to be crystal clear pretty quickly which one's the Dusty and which one's the recent one.
Yeah,
but it's more
because the current Kentucky Tavern is bottom shelfer, unfortunately.
Yeah, less than desirable. So it's more about sharing the history and sharing the whiskey. So that's I'm excited about that one.
June 13th, you've got one that is definitely one of the all-time great ones here, Ancient Age. So you know, again, kind of relegated to bottom shelf today, but I mean, that was a big time whiskey. Matter of fact, you know, the distillery, you know, was named Ancient Age.
Yep, absolutely. So this is what's today current Buffalo Trace. So that's all the whiskey out of Buffalo Trace is allocated and sought after. But we're going to put it's going to be proof to proof. It's going to be 2 86ers. One's a Dusty, obviously. One's the current 86er off the shelf, and we'll see how close they are, and we'll see what. I think what we're going to see it's another example of a pretty cool historic brand. That brand's been around for a long time as well. And we'll see if it's held up or it's been one of those that's kind of fallen to the wayside over the years. So I'm excited about that one.
So then we'll get the July event posted this week, but also on the calendar, just listed this week, today, August 2nd is a 1978 Old Charter. And you got an interesting story here, why this one is a standout.
Yeah, so it's Old Charter is Old Charter probably prior to the early 2000s. It's a really cool brand history. And it's really good whiskey. Like even going into, they still had the 7 and 8 year age statement all the way into the late 90s, early 2000s. And then they did that whole trickery with, it's not 8 year, but they left the number 8 on there and tried to fool everybody. And they had to change it again because it was kind of misdirecting consumers. But what also makes this one interesting is what I've learned through the years talking to distillers and going through some of the bourbon history. And I've seen this back a lot of, not all distilleries and not all distillers, but back specifically late 60s, but really 70s, 80s, and into the 90s, a lot of distilleries, because we know that's the time when whiskey's going downhill. It's clear spirits, it's cocktails, it's gin, it's vodka, it's all these things. And the whiskey world was hurting, and so they resorted to anything they could do to cut costs and to sell what whiskey they had and they had overproduced on. So one of the things they did is they stopped chill filtrating lower proof bourbons. So what basically when you chill filter, you're pulling out lipids and fatty acids and things of that nature. When an 80, typically it's only under about 90 proof. When you get into 90 and 100 proof, it won't matter. But an 80 and an 86 or anywhere in between that area, which back then it was pretty much only 80, 86, there weren't a lot of 84s or anything like that. Those bourbons that don't go through that chill filtration, once those get, if they get chilled, they set in a warehouse, they set in shipping somewhere, they set in someone's cellar or whatever. What happens is because they didn't filtrate those lipids and fatty acids out, they will actually, I call it, become visible or come alive. And if you don't know any better, it actually gives the whiskey a little bit of a like a hazy look, for lack of better terms, but it actually is a very flavorful whiskey. So I wanted to go through a little bit of that history and more along with the Old Charter and just kind of see what we find there. So
that'll be a fun one because I get to try one. Prior to the cutbacks of stop and chill filtering, that would have been a chill filtered whiskey. So the fact this is going to be a little bit more flavorful version of Old Charter, which is kind of cool.
Absolutely.
Sounds nice.
Yeah. Well, we like to respect, time of our guests. And so we got, I'd say, 5 minutes or so where we can ask Tim questions. Anybody have any questions for Tim or Wes? Either one.
Anybody going to be at the event tomorrow?
What event?
Tomorrow for the club, and that we've got the finale of our cocktail contest.
Oh yeah. I'll be there.
Is that the one you're talking about, Bill? And then we're doing the.
No, I was talking about the log still.
Oh, I didn't know. There's a log still event tomorrow. Tell us about that.
Well, it's not log still. It's the Dant compound or something. I don't know.
I think it's the 21st. They're having the grand opening of the venue, which is
21st. You're right.
Facility in the chapel. They're doing a grand opening, and all you have to do, by the way, to be on that database is just go on to the dantcrossing.com website or the logstilldistillery.com website. Enter your email address, and you will get prompts and email blasts ongoing for updates, especially information on concerts. If you want to get away, make it a great weekend, go down and see a lot of the great country western bands. And even, I think we've got an 80s rock. Joan Jett's going to be there this year at the amphitheater. And they're just going to continue to book great acts there it's called the Amp. And it's the outdoor amphitheater that seats anywhere between 2,000 and 3,000 people standing room only. But that grand opening of the venue in the chapel, Ken, you might be referring to that.
Yeah.
Which is later this week.
Nice.
Thursday.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Well, we thank you guys for. Kent.
I got a question.
One question. Okay. What do you got?
So Tim, when is this this newer version of the Dant going to be in stores in Oklahoma?
Well, the marketing plan, we rolled out obviously at Kentucky last year. Then we went across the river to Indiana. This year, Wally, who resides in Nashville, we rolled out into Tennessee, all the major cities in Tennessee. He made personal appearances, bottle signing events. So next year in 2023, I believe Texas and Georgia may be on the tap for distribution to those states. Oklahoma, Kent, good question, but given that we're going to be in Texas next year, probably realistically, they'll probably hit Dallas first and maybe Houston is just my guess. But so at least you'll be closer. But
It's getting there. It's
getting because I can get creative and get bottles to you if you'd like. So
We'll
bad.
just have to meet in Dallas for lunch, and I'll just buy me a case somewhere.
There you go.
There you go. There you go. Well, again, thanks so much, everybody, for coming out tonight and being part of this. Let's hear it for Mr. Wes Hardin. Great job, as always, by Wes. Good job, Wes, sir. Appreciate
Good
it.
delivery, man, too.
Yeah, really good. And of course, Tim Dant for coming on and taking time to tell us about his family. Really great job. Thank you, Tim.
No, thank you guys. I really appreciate it.
We will say goodbye. I'll turn off the recorder. Of course, for those that are watching this at home, we'll say goodbye to you. I'll stick around if you have any questions, want to talk whiskey for our studio audience here. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.